Yes, hi, welcome to my talk. Thanks for coming. Maybe a short intro about me and my colleague. So I'm Markus Vervier. I'm having a small security consultancy, X41. I usually speak German. I'm not a CISSP. Still, I might know something about security. Don't know. Yeah. My colleague in this research, JP, Jean-Philippe Aumasson, he couldn't be here today because he apparently is at the beach or something. Yeah, so good choice for him. Still, just before we start, some props. So why actually did we do this research? Was actually when we met at Black Hat last year. The talks were not that interesting, and so we started looking into the signal source code. Also to Open Whisper systems for like fixing some of the bugs, and to some colleagues who exchanged ideas with us. Actually, now I can add more people like Jörnchen and Skyline and everyone. So, yes. Signal. We want to look a bit on Signal, most secure messenger ever, like on the internals, on the attack surface, bugs, and that's it. We found, and some things we found, which might be somewhat interesting. After that, of course, we give some conclusions, but you can draw your own conclusions. So Signal, messaging app, probably you all use it or know it. So who of you uses Signal? Okay, basically everyone. So, yes. Then you all know Signal, what it can do, messaging app, Open Whisper systems, the MALICIOUS, Spike, and friends. So it was text secure before. Actually, it was two apps and they got merged. Text secure is the messaging app, and Signal, Red Phone was the voice and calling app. That was merged, and now it's Signal. They have a lot of implementations for Android, iOS, also Chrome desktop app. It's normally regarded as a very trusted tool, like Snowden endorsed it, and other very popular people. It's popular amongst activists, and yet the thing you see here is actually information returned in Unix milliseconds from a data request from, I think, the FBI or so. So they say they don't store much data. So yeah, somewhat secure. So security promises of Signal are, of course, like end-to-end encryption. You don't need to trust the backend or the transport of Signal. Even against active network attackers on compromised servers. Yes, and the code is perceived as somewhat of high quality. There was no major security issue so far. And they have apparently reproducible builds on Android. So actually, Signal is more than Signal. So it's the protocol. Signal protocol is used in Facebook's Messenger. If you turn on the incognito mode, it's used by WhatsApp. It's apparently used also by Google Allo's incognito mode. So they license that to a lot of other messengers, and so the actual user base is quite large beyond the Signal app. Yeah, so encryption. I will just go on briefly, because we could talk for hours probably about all the crypto stuff that's going on there, so we'll just skip the details. But like the base of Signal X3DH, Diffie-Hellman key agreement, is quite complicated key agreement. You have several keys, actually 4 key pairs, you have long-term and ephemeral keys, and Alice and Bob, they sort of do Diffie-Hellman and the key derivation, and they mix all these keys into it to derive a shared secret. Interesting here is that Signal actually uses sort of a trick for one-time prekeys. The problem in messengers are that if the one party is offline, you cannot really do a Diffie-Hellman, because if the party is offline, you cannot do a classical Diffie-Hellman because you have to wait for the round trip and everything. So it's not very convenient. So what they did is they store one part of the Diffie-Hellman already on the server as a prekey. So Bob will already have completed his part of Diffie-Hellman. Why this is interesting is very convenient. very efficient, but you will see later why this is actually interesting. So session keys in Signal are double ratchet, uses so-called double ratchet. It's basically the messages have unique keys, and this double ratchet is actually like advancing. So this gives sort of like forward secrecy. You cannot. So every first message from a party gets a new Diffie-Hellman. So this is so that even if the device is compromised, then the past messages are sort of safe when the keys are deleted from the device, of course. Attachments work similar. They have each attachment has a different crypto key, so it's quite good actually. Yes, so Moxie MALICIOUS actually wrote a blog post and he said, okay, Signal is actually the Signal protocol is actually like their intellectual property. So you cannot call your app Signal. So Signal is like really that. But the Signal-like protocol is used in a lot of other applications. So, okay, these are like the basics, Signal protocol, but actually that wasn't all, right? Because what about all the other things, like how are the other attachments actually encrypted? Like what is the crypto used for that? How are audio and video streams encrypted, and how does integrity checking work on these attachments and so on? How does group messaging work? We only talked about one-to-one scenarios. So these are sort of coded to documentation. The developers just did what they thought were right. Which is actually also quite interesting often. So, just a short recap. So Signal is not decentralized. It has a server. So you can see if two devices are end-to-end encrypted communication, but they use the Signal servers. For attachments, they also use Signal, and the attachments are actually stored on Amazon. They're stored on Amazon S3. And the messaging servers seem to be run by Open Whisper systems. As I said, end-to-end encryption, actually, it's supposed that the Signal servers do not need to be trusted. The code base for Signal is quite, we would say, large. And it has a lot of different implementations for iOS, for Android. There are libraries as a reference implementation for the service and for the protocol itself. You can see that that's more like maybe like 200,000 lines of code for only Signal. But we mainly looked at the Android app, and there the software stack is even larger. If you look at all the things that are used, the crypto that's used is the Curve25 from the JavaX crypto. So it's also quite standard. They did not do their own crypto, which is actually good, I guess. But you can see there's a lot of stuff in there. So as I said, we did not find a major security bug before that we know of. There was some analysis. There were minor security issues fixed, and there were like some key compromise and replay attacks discussed in academia, basically. So maybe the more interesting part, like what's actually our scenario here for attacking Signal. So there are basically like two scenarios. One is the network attacker, classical, like man in the middle, active or passive. He can inject, he can modify messages and try to sabotage stuff that's stored on the server, like the prekeys. Classic scenario. What's actually, let's say, more interesting scenario from an attack point of view is if you're the malicious peer. So you can actually have the crypto keys, so you can talk the encrypted protocol, and you can send media attachments, and you can basically do a lot more stuff than a passive or than in the middle attacker. And this is like often overlooked in design of crypto protocols or in crypto messengers, I would say. So as you can see, we have this great picture of the Signal code, and there's a lot of third-party code in Signal. So if you talk about attack surface, doesn't matter where the code comes from. So you have a lot of code that's actually not really under control of Signal and the Signal developers. You can see that in Android you have like 500,000 lines of code. In iOS you have a bit sort of less, but you have WebRTC. You have to say, okay, 500,000 lines of code, but most of it is OpenSSL, and most of it is not used. So to be fair, that's why there's such a difference, but still, there's a lot of stuff. You have OS components that decode images, that do low-level stuff, yeah, and the standard crypto. So maybe also in terms of attack surface, like I want to stress out, no messenger has that, but still, if you talk about like, okay, how can I be attacked, or how can someone using a messenger be attacked? There are no mitigations really, like no sandboxing between media parsers and the messaging part, and on Android there's no hardware key store used. Yes, and basically you cannot even prevent that media files are parsed from unknown sources. So I can just add you on Signal, send you stuff, and your Android device will basically parse that. Yes, so we have some dependencies. A lot of stuff is constantly added, so they now have GIF, they have disappearing messages, they have I think now more media types they can use, so it's getting larger and larger. It's not only the messaging anymore. Still, there's one thing, most important thing, of course, if you don't check the fingerprints, you're insecure anyway. So, I mean, basic stuff, but still, I don't think a lot of people do that actually, that are not security experts. There's a thing called break-in recovery for Signal. So if a special key or if the session key gets compromised on a device, the protocol should be sort of self-healing, because when a ratchet steps forward, this key should be like replaced. But if you look at it really, it's, yeah, the assumption is that the attacker only steals one key and not the other key, the root key. That is actually the KDF key. So yeah, that's sort of questionable. So coming to the actual things we found. Yeah, we had a very tedious process, like doing a lot of fuzzing and doing concolic execution and building models and crypt analysis, a lot of stuff. JP did a lot, and of course also the blockchain to record the vulns we found, and that's actually not true. We're not really knowing what we were doing. No, we were not really planning what we were doing. So seriously, we did not have a rigorous process, and we also did not audit Signal. So we did not use automated tools. We basically used auditing techniques. We looked into the code and did manual search for bugs and for things that were interesting. So of course, when you look at that from experience, you follow the input, you follow the data. You follow the edge cases, especially in protocols. You follow bug classes that are in programming languages, very prevalent. And as we looked at the server, at the client code, we did not look at the server code yet. So, and also, of course, we looked at the protocol, but not at the calling, which is now WebRTC. So probably not other people will have looked at that already. So basic tools, Android phones, iPhones, the Chrome extension, very good if you want to do like test stuff with Signal. There's this command line client. It's pretty nice. It's written in Java. I used the original Signal implementations, the libraries. Yes, and we wrote our own stuff a bit in Python. So maybe for the first thing we found a bypass of the Mac that protects attachments in Android. This is actually an interesting thing because apparently people are not looking for integer overflows in Java code, which they should, because even if you can't like directly cause memory corruptions like in C code or in other languages, the integer overflow we found here actually allows us to like bypass a check. So it subverts the program logic. We found an integer overflow here. So there's the encrypted file, and attached to it is a MAC address. Is a MAC. And this MAC, the message authentication code, they subtract the length of that from the length of the file, and it's turned into an int. And int in Java is 32 bits. So files can be more than 32 bits in length. So they can be like 4 gigabytes, or if you go above 2 already happens. So this value would actually wrap around. So later on, it will use this remaining data to read all the data that's of the attachment and calculate the MAC from that. So it will see if that data has been modified. So what we did is we hope you can see it here. You can we attached it's exactly 4 gigabytes of padding to the file, this results in the remaining data being like the original size. So here only the original first X bytes are actually checked, and the rest is not checked but processed later on. So yes, is that actually feasible? Yes, because the attachments are downloaded using HTTP, and HTTP has a thing called compression, HTTP compression, content compression. So if you attach 4 gigabytes of ACE to the message and you use gzip compression, it will result in 2 to 4 megabytes. 4 gigabytes compressed down to 2 to 4 megabytes, so it's totally feasible to send that to a mobile device. And it would take like in the background like some minutes to sort of unpack that, but it works. So yeah, you can. The result you can see here. Basically, we got an exception where we did that. We basically got an exception, a bad padding exception. So basically, we were bypassing the integrity check, and next the bad padding was wrong. So we thought, okay, that's pretty nice. Maybe we can do a padding oracle attack, which turned out to be not really working because we didn't have any back channel, so that was unfortunate. Still, we discovered that they were actually using AES CBC to encrypt the attachments. The problem with AES CBC encryption mode is that you can like mess with the ciphertext and with the outcome. So it's a malleability property. So basically, you can repeat encrypted blocks and they will decrypt fine, sort of. You can even, if you know the plaintext, you can even try to up to change or force every second block of the encrypted data to be something that you want to have. It's a known plaintext attack, but still, it's quite interesting. So yeah, we have this little demo because there were people like claiming that this is actually not really feasible to attack. So we had to do this little demo. I hope the sound works. Let's see. So first of all, we just like repeat the content, which is interesting for audio messages actually. As you can see, the last part of the message has been repeated. So this is just plain stupid, straightforward. To just say, okay, let's just repeat the message and see what happens. If you actually know, if it's a voice message, if you actually know what's spoken, things get even more interesting because you can now try to chop up the file.
The signal MAC validation bypass is not an issue. It has no impact and is therefore not so bad.
This is what was received.
The signal MAC validation bypass is not an issue. It has no impact and is therefore not so bad. The signal MAC validation bypass has no impact and is therefore so bad, so bad, so bad, so bad. No impact and so bad. Bypass, no impact is bad. Bypass, no impact is bad. Bypass.
So the impact is apparently is bad. It's not super bad, but a bit bad. So maybe Yonchi can use that and do DJ tonight for the party. Yes. So apparently, if you know something about what was transmitted, you can do all kind of interesting things. So think about this, and this binary data could also get interesting. I don't know, inserting stage right into media files or so on from trusted contexts. Okay. Then we found some sort of quirk, which is, yeah, it's not a vulnerability, but it's like, say, a very strange property of the crypto protocol. If you set your public key to 0, actually the shared secret will also be 0. So what does that mean? So you could set your public key to 0, and someone who wants to communicate with you will get a predictable shared secret. So the encryption is not really working anymore. You could argue, okay, actually, I mean, you could also publish your messages if you want to attack yourself or if you want to attack your peer. Still, other libraries do it differently, and it's very easy to just discard the 0 keys. So maybe you should do that. Also, it might be some kind of deniability issue, and this break-in recovery is also killed by it. So yeah. But Open Whisper Systems doesn't want to fix it, so yeah. Then if you think about using the signal reference implementations, or if you like, for example, the tests and demo code that's provided with that, be very careful, because actually, yeah, there are some bugs in it. So there are some callbacks, and we found type confusion there. We found integer overflows with heap overflows. Interestingly, something happened. Ah. Okay. So there's a lot of stuff. So if you're using the C examples, though, be careful. Another interesting bug we found in Signal is an underflow in the RTP code for calling of signals. It's actually a bit of a waste, because this bug is actually not exploitable beyond the crash, because it was shadowed by another bug, or more or less by the same overflow, like twice. Still, it was quite interesting. So can you see that? Yeah, it's here in the bottom. The payload length is actually calculated from the packet length minus the RTP header. So what they forget to check is, of course, that the packet is actually large enough to actually have a header. So if the packet is like 1 byte long, it will underflow, and the payload length will be like negative, which of course is not good. Later on, it gets thrown into an HMAC, so we'd have a very large out of bounds read, and so on. All kinds of weird stuff happens here. But as I said, it's not really exploitable, but you could at least use it to crash remote signal instances. Yes. Speaking of crashing, we quite found some things that are interesting. So Signal Android uses libsgear for media decoding, and this is actually, yeah, all bugs on libsgear will hurt you. We have an example here. So just an example of a crash. Didn't check if it's exploitable, but the signal thing will actually receive a message. Boom. So this is Android 7 from last year. apparently it triggers some kind of bug in the Android, which is sort of a problem because as soon as the Android boots up, it will start Signal again and it will crash again. So basically your Android device is sort of bricked if you're not able to, I don't know, intercept the boot and delete Signal from that. So it's, yeah, quite an interesting thing. Internally, I think it was more like hitting an assertion. So it's not a kernel bug or something we hit. It's a bug in Android, more or less, but it's triggered by Signal. And I think this is a quite interesting example. Another bug that's actually interesting is actually in the Chrome extension for Signal. Let me see if I can find that. So, set it up here. Oh. Actually, I want to have it here. Oh. Okay. That doesn't really work. Interesting. Yeah, this is the demo effect. So I guess I have to sort of show that later. Oh, except if it crashed already, maybe. Sorry for that. Okay, so I can try to show that later. It's basically a crash in the Signal Chrome extension if it receives a bad SVG. So it took us like 10 minutes to create an SVG to create the crash to render with an out of memory condition in the SVG parsing. The point to show is actually if you have any exportable bug in the SVG parser of Chrome, this will actually give you access to all the Signal messages because it will crash the extension, or we exploit the extension, exploit the renderer, and set to render out all the messages. So basically, the sandbox and anything is not helping you in that case. So maybe for also more interesting thing, we looked at the protocol. We actually found a message replay. For that, it's kind of a bit complicated maybe. Maybe you remember I talked about this X3DH and the prekeys. They used to speed up the keys exchange and the key derivation. So normally these keys are like one time because, of course, if you do a Diffie-Hellman and the values are repeated, you will get the same shared secret, and you will get you can replay messages that are like encrypted and integrity checked with that. Therefore, the messages are one-time prekeys, except for one of these keys, and this is the last resort key, or however you want to call it. Seems to be a fallback mechanism against DOS. So in the code, there's this, or actually they call it medium term key. So there's this is the idea of this key. So if this is encountered, I cannot really see it on the beamer, but so if this is encountered, it will not delete the key from its key store. It allows it to be reused. So yeah, as I said, so when I want to send a message to someone else, I will, and then never talked to him before, I will fetch his prekey from the server, complete the Diffie-Hellman, encrypt my message, and send my public Diffie-Hellman values together with the encrypted message to Bob. He will also complete the Diffie-Hellman on his side and can decrypt my message. So, and then the key is removed except for the last resort key. So, this means if you could replay if you could replay that, if you could repeat that, you could, replay it. They try to prevent it, but maybe let's first look, how does such a message look like? So basically, you have the encrypted message here on the right, which is the encrypted ciphertext, and on the left are the values that Alice, public values of Alice, that's the base key, ephemeral key of her, Alice identity key, the signed PREKEY ID that is used, and the PREKEY ID, and the registration. So some values. These are used to complete the key exchange on Bob's side and are sent by Alice. So it's a message, bundled message, encrypted message, and key exchange message. So interestingly, in Signal, in the current implementation, the key exchange part is not really integrity checked. So there's a message authentication code on the message, but it's not on this part. So basically, if you're a man in the middle, you can just modify these values and create arbitrary, like random sessions in Bob's key store or session store, which is very useful to us. So you can create like fake sessions. So for the replay, they try to prevent the replay by not doing key agreement for known like public base keys from Alice. So they will not create the same session twice for the same key. Also, they will not remember this session if the encrypted message part is actually not decrypted correctly. So interestingly, they only can remember a certain number of session states. So after 40 sessions, they will forget the old ones. So if you're able to create fake sessions, you can push out a valid session. And this means actually you can like purge the session from the session store to have it replayed. Also, the valid ciphertext, maybe if I go back here, you need a valid ciphertext in this part of the message, but interestingly, this does not have to be related to this part, because you can have multiple sessions in parallel, and it will try all of these sessions if one of them can actually decrypt that message. So you can just take a message from another session, ongoing session, and have it actually bundle it with something from a new session. So basically, you can get around that check. Yes. So to recap, so no integrity checks. Bob doesn't check if the encrypted message belongs to that part, and also there's a limit on the session states. So if you combine that, we could force sessions to be only created with the last resort key. We actually push out the session state that we want to have replayed by creating these fake sessions. And of course, we have to record the first messages that should be replayed. So I can show a demo. Actually, like when we first did this research, we had a demo on a toy client, but I managed, like this morning, to actually do that on, I think the beamer's out again. Somewhat. Oh, okay. So, because I don't trust the demo god, I recorded it actually, and also to show you on a real phone. So what I did is I created a simple man-in-the-middle server for Signal. Of course, I had to break the TLS for that. But I mean, a man-in-the-middle scenario, of course, you can assume that the Signal servers are like compromised. So, and I have used the command line client to send messages to this Signal app on my phone. So we have this middle stuff that will intercept stuff, and then I sent a message, never replay. This is a message that should never be replayed. I'm sorry for the shaky quality, but yeah. So basically, the message is like going to the middle, and there, never replay. So what I will what is also now necessary for some obscure reason is that you have to reset the session. So basically, people have to reset the session, There's a detail I can explain to you in more detail, but it's, yeah. You have to reset the secured session, so maybe the network was stalled, you thought you have to reset the session. So you actually do that, and then you can send, hello? Ah, okay. Then you can send actually another message. Okay. So we sent the next message. So what we're doing now is we're sending more than 40 messages where we actually, when we're in an active man in the middle, we modify 40 messages sent from Alice to Bob and add a new fake session state to it. We need to do that to be able to push out the original session so we can replay it. So that's what we're doing now. So I just send message 1, 2, 3. You can see it's actually receiving that. The network is not really great. Yeah. So instead of now waiting for the 40 messages, I will just actually skip that part. So the next part, we actually should be able to, see how it actually works. So we receive some of these messages. Until we should already have exhausted the sessions store and pushed out the session we want to replay. We're doing that, so now it sent like 42 messages that were modified in transit without the Signal client knowing or recognizing that, even if it's fully verified and the identity. So yeah, here we have that. So if we now send another message, actually, I will just send some message test. It should also, our man-in-the-middle server will replay the message. You see, there the message was replayed, actually. The never replayed message that was sent in the first place was replayed and inserted into the conversation, basically. Yes, so that's, I think, probably most interesting thing, because it's a protocol attack. Maybe just some lasting some quirk. It's also not really a vulnerability, but it's an interesting thing, so maybe someone has an idea about that. When you receive an audio file over Signal on Android, it will actually open a web server on localhost, HTTP server, and like unencrypted stream the audio file to the media player on Android. So it will connect to localhost, some random port with a random URI, and we'll stream that unencrypted to that thing. The URI is really random, so we couldn't guess it, but yeah, it doesn't really feel right. So if you have any kind of information about or information leak, or your random number generator is broken, you actually can intercept or get to the audio attachments from other apps. Yeah, which is interesting, sort of. Now you can also have other attachments. We didn't really look at that, but it's an interesting point of future research. Yes, so it's actually quite interesting. So maybe to sort of come to an end. So Signal has a huge code base. It's largely under-analyzed. So we did not do an audit. We just found some bugs. So it's not complete. We did that in our free time because we were interested in looking at Signal. And we would expect a lot more bugs if somebody would really do a very thorough audit of that, I guess. So like protocol stuff. And yeah, actually the general point we want to raise is actually that the secure messengers are not secure if they are based on all these components and they have not mitigations, no isolation, no sandboxing, no nothing. So one bug is enough currently. And that's actually, I think, one of the main points. So it's not about security of Signal itself, but of all the other things also. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the floor? No? Yeah.
It depends on the scenario you're using it for. So it's a classic OPSEC thingy. It depends. I mean, if you're afraid of an attacker that is using 0 days to get you, you're not safe. Probably for the average person, I would say it's not more unsafe than other messengers.
Okay. One question I had when you said that the message headers were not validated.
Mm-hmm.
What would happen if I send a message, if I have a session with the recipient, and I send a message with the header of someone else? Will it show up in his application as though the other one sent it?
No, because it's there's also a registration ID, and the session is fixed to these communication parties, as far as I know. So it should not have a message from someone else because the keys won't match. So.
For audio files, was there any indication why it was streaming from a HTTP server on localhost rather than a local media player, or any better, more logical method?
I don't know, no. That's why I put it up here. It's like a very strange thing, and yeah, it's I don't know, maybe there was some reason in Android, or I don't know. It doesn't do that on iOS, so not sure.
Thanks for your talk, first of all. I had a question about the demo, the one with the 40 message thingy. So you've been sending like 42 messages to do the exhaustion of the PREKEY, right?
Yes.
My question is, can you do that transparently for the user, just messing with the header of the PREKEYs and stuff, without sending the whole load of messages?
Yes, okay, that's a good point. Actually, I think the demo was maybe not that clear in that regard. You have to modify 40 messages. So I had two.
Okay, so you were simulating an actual conversation.
Yes. So this was an actual conversation, and I had to have a proxy, or a simple Python proxy that parses the protocol and modifies the messages. So it's actually message modification attack, or how you want to call it. Yeah.
Any other questions? Oh, no? Thank you very much.
Thank you.